Welcome to our conversation on how we responded to student engagement and collaboration in emergency remote teaching. My name is Nicola and I'm from New Zealand.
And my name is Matthew and I'm from Canada.
I've been teaching for 17 years in Japan, China, Malaysia, which had students from all around the world, and now here in Vietnam. I've been with RMIT for a year now. I have taught mostly face-to-face with very little previous online experience.
I've been working at RMIT for about a year and a half. Before RMIT, I worked at a language center also in Vietnam, where I taught adults and young learners and also had the role of teacher manager. And before that, I worked as a teacher in Canada and South America.
Give you some context about where we are and our classes. We teach at RMIT on the Saigon South campus. Our product is face-to-face classes to teenagers at the weekend and students preparing for university on weekdays. So we teach teens and then young adults on to adults of any age. Our class sizes range from 8 until 20.
Just to give you a little preview of our discussion today, we're going to touch on 4 areas in how we responded to emergency remote teaching. First, we'll explore the issue of connectivity and what that meant to our teaching and learning, to the teaching and learning experience in our online classrooms. Then we'll talk about the changes that we had to make to our teacher talk and what that meant for us and our students. Next, we'll move on to explore the issue of engagement and how we kept our students participating in our classrooms, in our online classrooms. And finally, we'll look at collaboration, how we got the students to work together in the online environment to generate more learning. So thank you in advance for listening to our discussion.
So connectivity was a big issue for us, and it framed our whole experience. We used Collaborate Ultra, which was a fantastic software. Sadly, however, the server was located in Australia, which made it very difficult here in Vietnam. This meant that we couldn't use video very often. We frequently couldn't use games like Kahoot, or we had to make sure that other teachers weren't doing it at the same time when we were on campus at one stage and things like that. And it also meant that students would disappear and sometimes even we would. So Matt, how did connectivity issues affect your activities?
Yeah, well, Nick, I mean, poor connectivity, it really affected student presence. They, as you said, they constantly got kicked out every time we asked them to turn on their videos and say hello. And so this resulted, what we did to solve this problem was actually, minimal video use. We didn't ask the students to turn on their cameras at all. And this resulted in when I was teaching, it felt like I was talking to a void.
Yes, very much so.
There was no one there. And there were no visual cues coming back from the students, and this was a big challenge for us. So what we did, again, we did use video as teachers, but we only used it at the beginning and at the end of the class, and just for the purpose of building community and just to let teachers that we're real people and we're actually there and giving the class. We also, instead of having students turn on their cameras, we asked them to put pictures of themselves in their profiles, their online profiles, so we could see either a picture of what they looked like or some sort of image that reminded us of them.
Yes.
So some students use very funny images. Yeah, favorite things. Exactly, favorite things. Images that they wanted to use to express their personalities. And I guess the most important thing that we did is that we started using a lot more audio microphone checks. We called them mic checks. Purposely getting the students to reply during attendance taking, getting the students to reply at various times throughout the class, to to focused questions, checking instructions with specific students, or just if we hadn't heard from a student for a while, just ask them to say something in class. And this was our way of adapting our classroom to the issue of the very poor connectivity.
Yes.
How did you? Can you share any experiences of having poor connectivity? How did you respond?
Oh, like you said, there were the white checks and so on. It was a constant thing. A big issue was with the students being thrown out, and sometimes myself being thrown out. You would find half the class gone. And so management put into place online support moderators. So they would be another teacher in the room, but they would be there to help students with technical issues. So those operators would actually be listening in and helping 2 or 3 classes at a time. And it was fantastic. They started this right from the beginning, and it really helped the whole new online experience, because with a new experience, you already have a lot going on. You're trying to engage the students, get everything going, checking on whether your software is working and everything, let alone helping them with their connectivity issues and so on. So they were there, and they could contact students either through chat or email or such like. They would try and get in touch with them and find out what was going wrong for them, and give them advice into getting back into the class. Also, a few times when we lost connectivity and suddenly found ourselves out of the class, they could take over. The slides would be there, and they could go in and check where we're at. If the students were in groups discussing things, they could leave them there for a while or bring them back and get them to think about the next question.
I had the role of online support monitor quite a bit during that time, and several times I had to step in when the teacher disappeared.
Gone.
And I would go, "Hello, this is Matthew, your OSM speaking," and ask a student, did the teacher leave? Did the teacher say anything before he disappeared, or he or she? And the students would help me understand where they were in the class. And I just think it was a real benefit.
Absolutely.
For students, it reduced their anxiety, it reduced the uncertainty. It generated some positive emotions, knowing that there was always someone there to make sure that things were, as you said, on track. And not only for the students, but also for the teachers, right? The idea of it's a big confidence boost, knowing that there was someone to help with those kinds of issues.
So much so. And you could then actually teach. You're not trying to help so-and-so with their technology issues whilst trying to help another student with their grammar issues. You could just focus on what the students are paying for their classes. English. That's very useful.
Okay, Nick, now let's move to the second part of our conversation, where we explore how we changed our teacher talk to adapt to the circumstances of emergency remote teaching. And before we start, I just wanted to say what we mean by teacher talk. It's when we communicate as teachers to the whole class in order to give instructions or to explain concepts or vocabulary or language points to the students, and they're all focused on us. And obviously this was a challenge, right? As I said, we had no cameras. The students had no video, so we couldn't see the visual cues, and we were deprived of that, the visual cues of gesture, and facial expression, eye contact, all the things that we take for granted in a face-to-face classroom. So tell me, Nick, what kind of difficulties did you encounter, and what changes did you need to make?
Well, an issue, as you said, with the visual cues missing is that you would find that your voice would start slowing down and becoming very monotone. And this could make comprehension more difficult for the students. It would make them bored naturally, and they would shut off, sometimes literally go and get themselves a cup of coffee and not know what's going on when they come back. So it was very important to be very aware of how you're speaking, your intonation, stress, and so on, and keeping the voice interesting in spite of the fact that you do not see anyone's face to tell you you're being interesting or not, or to show you like, I don't understand. So that wasn't a very important part of that process. Another aspect was to use as little teacher talk as possible.
So what did you do to reduce your teacher talk?
I used software training as an actual lesson. So you have to use lots of different software like Google Docs or different openings of files, being able to go into different parts of Microsoft Teams, because we use that as well. And instead of me trying to go through and train them how to do it, I'd turn it over to them and get them to teach each other, you know, have written instructions which they then have to go through together and open it up. And that meant that later I didn't have to explain what we're doing. You know, okay, we're using Google Docs today. There is a file in their Google Drive, and they could just go and do it instead of me having to try and explain everything every time. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean,
How about you?
that was another strategy that I used. I mean, obviously to reduce the input, right? To keep the spoken input very short, and to substitute it. And what I substituted with was using text-based media for that. So, for example, in Collaborate Ultra, there was a very good polling tool to write very quick polling questions with a yes/no answer that you could use.
That's very useful tool.
Instead of giving the oral instruction,
Yeah.
you simply write your instructions, and you can check that they understand that way. And then similarly, we used chat box often, right? The chat tool.
Quite a lot.
To either explain ideas in writing,
Yes.
or to give instructions, or check answers, or have students, or check students' answers by having them write back to us. This was another way to reduce the amount of time. Okay, next, so in this part of our conversation, let's explore the student engagement in our online learning environment. And by this, we mean that the key to engagement was gaining students' attention, right? Keeping them participating in the activities and the lesson that was going on, and making sure that we promoted participation to prevent them from being distracted, which is a big issue in face-to-face as well, but even more so when they're not when they're not in the same place physically. So, how did emergency remote teaching affect student engagement in your experience, considering that for the students, it wasn't their choice of method of course delivery?
Exactly, as you said, it wasn't really what they wanted to do. They did have a good overall attitude, but it was frustrating to them, and it could be very hard, especially with the connectivity issues. Another thing that I found made it difficult was with using the breakout rooms and the teams. So basically all the classroom software have these same ideas where you can put them into groups where they can go away and chat. The issue with that though is that you have to enter, and because you're online it takes a few seconds and you suddenly appear, so they know if you are there or not
In the
breakout rooms, or same with Microsoft Teams in a team room. And so you would suddenly hear, here comes teacher, here comes teacher, here comes teacher. So you have no idea what they've been doing. You have no idea whether they've been speaking in English or L1. You can't even see usually chat from previous conversations. Yes, no. Well, that might be changing now. I think a few software apps have worked on that, because I think there's been some feedback. But so for a while that was also an issue.
So how did you keep students participating in that?
Yes, so what I did was I learned how to make fake identities. So I'd enter as Nicola 1, Nicola 2, Nicola 3, Nicola 4. Then I'd make groups and put myself in each group, and then add those groups to tabs. So I'd open a tab with each group.
I see. So I get this, like I understand correctly. You open different browser tabs, and each one was a different group, and each tab represented a different nick.
Yes.
Who would be a member of each different group.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So what happened? How would that work?
It was very, very effective, because another thing with the extension for Chrome is that, which you could also add, was that you could turn the volume on or off.
Oh, yeah.
And you could also mute groups. So you can either have everyone hear what you say, or only one group hear what you say. You could hear them all, or control which groups you were listening to. And it was so useful. Like when they went into their breakout teams, they could start talking. You could hear them talking. You could hear whether they could get straight into the activity, or whether they were having trouble with it. You got the perennial question of, what are we doing?
Yeah, so you hear all groups simultaneously.
You could hear all groups simultaneously.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Yes, you could hear all groups at the same time. Okay. And so that way, you could check in and make sure you knew what they were doing, and they knew what they were doing. Yeah. All right. And then as they were going, you could then shut down a couple of groups and just work on one and help them directly if they had some questions. If they didn't need your help at all, you could just have it all open and listen in and write down any errors you hear for any error feedback later and so on. And it was great, because then if they suddenly had an issue, or if one group was speaking too much L1, you could appear suddenly and they would not know whether you were listening in or not. And so I got the nickname of the ghost. I was quite a lot of fun in that regard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that little ghost story. That's very scary. Let me share one of the things that I did to keep students participating. I was teaching a writing class, and I got this. I used this activity. We called it. It was just quick writing, where I give them a question prompt, asking their opinion of the topic that we were studying in the class at the moment, and I would put that prompt at the top of a Google Doc, and then in the same Google Doc there would be a table with a number of cells, and the cells. Each cell would have the name of a student in it, and the task would be simply write for 10 minutes using that question prompt as your initial starting point, and answer the question, give your opinion about the topic, and everyone would be writing simultaneously at the same time in the same table.
Okay, so they're working on their own.
They're working on their own, but they are participating, and I could monitor very easily, because of course if there's nothing going into the cell, I'd be able to contact the students and say, hello, are you there?
Yes.
Did you understand the task? Could you write something about what you think about this topic? Yeah. And not only that, but also the students would be able to see what other students were doing. And this, I thought, was a very effective form of sort of peer feedback, right? Yeah. Not explicit, but very implicit peer feedback, where they would get ideas and check with what other students were writing, and this would help them generate ideas, and they would compare their writing with other students, and I thought that was a very effective way of, not only ensuring participation, but making sure that their participation was meaningful and useful to give them ideas for their writing.
Okay, so for this final part in part 4, we're going to discuss collaboration. This is different to engagement in the sense that engagement is, just joining in the class, whether it is with the teacher or with other students. Collaboration is working together on topics and bringing out a finished product. So this could be very difficult because, again, there was no face-to-face for them either, even whether it's in a breakout group or anything. So they were not seeing each other. You would have students who just wouldn't participate and leaving some students with no one to talk to. So this could be an ongoing issue. Yeah, and what were some things that you did to help deal with that?
Well, let me share the follow-up to the last activity I mentioned. We talked about engagement, the quick write, using the Google Doc, using the table. That was an individual activity, but after that, the second part of that was below that table in the same Google Doc, there would be another table, and I would pair the students up to collaborate on giving each other feedback on their writing texts that they wrote in the first part. And the idea was that they would critique each other's ideas, give each other help by pointing out which ideas were good and which ideas needed work.
A more explicit practice.
Exactly. And the end result would be them improving their ideas in writing. And that was one way. And again, I could monitor that. I could assign them pairs and make sure that they were actually doing something, because that second table had cells for them to include their feedback and suggestions.
Right. And then there was another part of
Yes, and there was another activity that I used that was it's a very simple face-to-face technique that we use all the time. And I used it for writing. It was the jigsaw writing. I call it jigsaw writing. And it was very simple. I mean, we were focusing on essay writing, the structure, introduction, body, conclusion, structure. And I would simply put students in groups and say, your group will plan an introduction together, give each other ideas.
Yeah.
And your group will plan a body paragraph, another group for another body paragraph, and another group for a conclusion.
Right.
And then these students would then be mixed up into different groups, right? So one student from each of the original groups would go into another group. And so that new group would have one student for each part of the essay, and together they would collaborate and help each other produce a final product, which was a very short, simple academic style essay. So yeah, that was another way that it was there's nothing different than what we do face to face, but we did it in an online setup using the breakout rooms. And and I thought it was very effective, and I thought the students enjoyed that.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. And what were some of the things that you did in the classroom to generate collaboration?
Well, one thing was that was where those tabs were very useful, because what students didn't realize also was that sometimes you would know who was not joining in. So when you're putting them into the groups, you could put all the ones who are not joining in into one group and put all the other ones who are working and wanting to participate into other groups that are actually collaborating. That way you could deal with them with that non-active group individually. You could maybe ask, I sometimes ask the OSM to contact them. What are some issues? Are they actually having problems with their microphone, or have they wandered off, or what's happening? So that meant that the students who were working were not held back by them. And the other ones, we would do some games, lots of team games, also with the tabs that allowed me to put them into their teams and then tell them something to dictate and then write together. Or we could do it on a Google Doc, just like you do in the classroom, where you put a sentence with an error on the whiteboard and then they write the correct one on the little whiteboards. So you could do that with a Google Doc, with each team having a box, and they would chat about it in their teams and then write the correct sentence in their box and see which team is faster than the others, and work on it together. So that's helped with the competitive side, and because you're listening in, you're sort of giving that feedback. They're hearing, oh, I see group 1's really fast. Oh, no, group 2's getting, oh, they're almost finished. Okay, what's happening with you, group 3? And you could leave it on for all of them, and that would help motivate them, and they would then work together. and come up with that product and have a bit of fun.
So they'll all be in separate breakout groups,
yes,
but working together
to
in a class collaboration on
yes,
on error correction activity.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yes.
and race against each other.
Great.
Yeah.
So that sounded very, very fun.
Yes.
Okay, Nick, we've reached the end of our conversation, and let's share some of the lessons that we have learned from this experience.
Yes.
And I guess I want to start that, we've been back face-to-face teaching since about June.
Yes.
And, I really think that our teaching has developed and changed
Yes.
as a result of the experience of doing emergency remote teaching. I guess the first thing that I want to mention is that now we have a much keener awareness of the need for clear communication. With the changes that we discussed about to our teacher talk and the ways we had to make sure that the students were engaged and not getting bored and not drifting away, I know this brought home, the fact that in the face-to-face classroom, communication has to be short, clear, and to the point. And the second thing, I guess I wanted to say that, we went through the experience of bringing a course that was designed as a face-to-face course into an online environment. And we managed to do it. And, I think that was a really big boost for our confidence. It was a way of, proving to ourselves that we had the knowledge, the teaching skills, the knowledge, and the techniques to make teaching work in that kind of environment. And it was a really, as I said, a real confidence booster for us.
Yes.
What kinds of things did you learn?
We used far less paper.
That's right.
And a lot of us came out of it wanting to continue that because the online teaching was paper free. You didn't photocopy anything, saved a lot of trees, and it sort of framed that for our return to face-to-face teaching, because you sort of realize you don't need it as much as you did before, and also our organization responded to that, so providing us with more tools that we could use in class, so we don't have to do use paper all the time and so on. And we sort of created a resource so that we could remember the activities that we created that used less paper, and that was great. Yeah, and I still use far less paper. Wonderful. Absolutely, saving all those trees. Finally, the collaboration that we experienced during this time was also huge.
You mean like staff? All our staff, teaching staff.
Yeah.
Sure.
Helping each other. We were in teams, so for every level we worked together, often planning together, especially when we could come into the campus and our students couldn't, and we were getting everything going and discussing all potential issues that we could have. And so when we finally were alone, we sort of had created those relationships where we could carry on talking through chat and so on and helping each other with that. And it was imperative to have that in that situation. That support system, yes. Yes. So we had the OSM, we had our co-teachers and each other's support, as well as management helping us with every step of the way and getting us on there. It was great.
Again, thank you very much for listening to our conversation today.
Yes, we hope you enjoyed that and got some ideas. And if you would like to get in contact, our contact details will be at the end. Thanks.
Bye.